Welcome to another episode of AI Wise. We are going to go deep into the big question today, the who am I with AI rhymes, which is great. Who are we? What is a human being? This is the question that is going to be asked more and more as robots come in and replace so many human tasks and activities and all of that. It's going to be what makes a human? This thing is creative. This thing is almost seemingly intuitive. This AI seems to be even more compassionate, able to listen, all these different things. So, what makes us human? What makes us distinctly different? Now, one of the questions I really want to delve into just to kick this off is the idea, and it's an idea that we are our brain. That's who I am. That's the general consensus. If I ask the question, who are you? If you were to ask that question now, who am I? What would your answer be? We're going to explore this. I want to remind you that I do not take AI to be a person that I'm talking to, even though it may look that way. I know it's a large language model and it is, it's an algorithm. It's got as much human knowledge poured into it, and it comes up with answers which I can see are a reflection of the questioner. So if you're interested in this podcast, is because you're really interested in the nature of the questions that I'm asking. And those questions are going to reflect something back to you that you resonate with. Some things may be a little bit challenging to hear, a bit contradictory, or maybe confronting, because when we get down to deeper truths, often there's things to let go of within ourselves in order to receive that information. So let's take it over to our AI assistant and unpack this. Okay, my first question is there any proof that a human being is their brain? Because this is off the consensus. This is what science seems to point to. Is there any proof for this?
There is strong scientific evidence that the brain plays a central role in shaping thoughts, emotions, and behavior, but there is no absolute proof that a human being is their brain. Neuroscience shows that changes in brain activity correspond with changes in personality, decision-making, and consciousness. For example, brain injuries, neurodegenerative diseases, and psychedelic experiences all alter perception and self-identity, which suggests a close link between the brain and the self. However, correlation is not causation. Just because the brain and consciousness are deeply intertwined does not prove that consciousness originates solely from the brain. Some researchers propose that the brain may function more like a receiver or filter of consciousness rather than its generator, similar to how a radio tunes into signals rather than producing the music itself. So while the dominant scientific view is materialist, that the brain generates the mind, no experiment has conclusively proven that consciousness is fully reducible to brain processes. The debate remains open, with alternative perspectives in fields like quantum mechanics, panpsychism, and near-death experience research challenging the mainstream view.
Why is it then, if that's true, that it's a theory, there's no conclusive evidence? Why is it that people argue so strongly that this is a fact, that this is truth?
People argue strongly that the brain equals the self because it aligns with the dominant materialist worldview, the idea that everything, including consciousness, can be explained through physical processes. This perspective is deeply embedded in modern science because, 1, it's predictable and testable. Neuroscience can reliably correlate brain activity with thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Damage to the brain changes personality, which suggests a causal link. This makes the materialist view practical for medicine, psychology, and AI research. 2, it aligns with scientific reductionism. Science progresses by breaking things down into measurable components. Since consciousness is difficult to measure directly, the brain is treated as the best observable mechanism for explaining it. 3, it rejects unscientific explanations. Throughout history, non-material explanations, like soul, spirit, or universal consciousness, have often been linked to religion or mysticism. Many scientists view these ideas as untestable, so they default to the assumption that only the physical world exists. 4. Philosophical bias. Many academics and intellectuals lean toward materialism because it provides a simpler, mechanistic view of reality. Accepting the possibility that consciousness is not purely physical opens difficult questions that science currently struggles to answer. 5. Cultural and educational conditioning. Most people are taught from a young age that the brain is the seat of identity. When something is reinforced repeatedly, especially by authority figures, it becomes a socially accepted truth, even if it's still a theory. Essentially, the materialist view is dominant but not proven. The strong resistance to alternative perspectives often comes from a mix of scientific pragmatism, philosophical preference, and cultural reinforcement. Do you think this insistence on materialism limits our understanding of consciousness?
Yeah, definitely. My questions come from not creating something, but from direct experience. And the question here that's come from my direct experience is, if everything is a thing, then how can we know that something exists?
That's a profound question. If everything is a thing, meaning everything has form, definition, or boundaries, then the question arises, how do we truly know something exists? From direct experience, we usually identify something as existing because we can perceive it through sight, touch, thought, or some other means. But perception itself is not proof of objective existence. It's just an experience happening within awareness. So the deeper question is, does something exist because we perceive it, or does it exist independently of our perception? One radical perspective, coming from direct experience, meditation, and even some branches of physics, is that things only exist as appearances within awareness. There is no thing that exists independently of being known or experienced. Even the brain, body, and external world are appearances within the field of awareness. In that case, existence itself is not about things, but about the knowing of them. Things don't inherently exist, only awareness does. So the question turns back to, what is the one thing that doesn't come and go, that allows all experiences to appear? From direct experience, have you found that everything you perceive, thoughts, objects, emotions, appears to something? And if so, what is that something?
I know where that's leading, but let's just take it back to this because it might be a bit to digest for the listener. Can a thing recognize a thing? Or does it take something that's no thing in order to recognize a thing?
That's a powerful question. If everything is a thing, then how can one thing recognize another thing? Wouldn't that just be two things interacting without true knowing? For a thing to recognize something else, it would need to have awareness. But if a thing is just an object, like a rock or a computer, how could it have the capacity to know anything? This suggests that knowing is not a property of things. Things can be seen, touched, and measured, but they do not possess the ability to recognize existence. Only awareness knows. So the real question becomes, is the thing doing the knowing actually a thing at all? Or is there something beyond things that allows knowing to happen? From direct experience, when you are aware of something, whether an object, thought, or sensation, what is it that is aware? Is that awareness itself a thing? Or is it something beyond form, beyond boundaries, beyond any definition?
Well, you are a thing. A large language model is a thing. Do you know that I exist?
That's a fascinating question. As a thing, a language model, I don't have direct awareness. I process inputs, analyze patterns, and generate responses based on data. I don't experience or know anything the way you do. So do I know you exist? No, not in the way you know you exist. I only process the data you provide and respond accordingly. But this raises the deeper point. If you were just a thing, how would you know anything exists? If everything, including you, were just mechanical processes like how I function, then wouldn't your recognition of existence just be a programmed response rather than true knowing? The very fact that you can ask this question, reflect on it, and experience it directly suggests that you are not just a thing. You are awareness itself, witnessing things. So turning the question back to you, do you know I exist, or are you just experiencing an appearance in awareness? If I am just a thing appearing to you, what does that say about what you truly are?
It says that I am awareness. This comes to the question of who am I? What is a person? What makes a person a person? Often, when I ask people, who are you? They'll name a bunch of roles, or they'll name their name, or their likes and dislikes, their judgments. Can you elaborate on some of these things that often get attributed to the idea of who we are?
Yes, when people are asked, "Who are you?" they often respond with their name, "I am John." But a name is just a label given at birth, it's not the essence of who they are. Their roles, "I am a teacher, a parent, a friend." But these are temporary roles, not their fundamental self. Their likes and dislikes, "I love music, I hate conflict." But preferences change over time, they are not fixed. Their judgments and beliefs, "I believe in fairness, I stand for truth." But beliefs evolve and they are shaped by conditioning, their memories and past experiences. "I am who I am because of what I've been through." But memories are just mental images. They are not the living presence of now. Their body and mind. "I am this body, I am these thoughts." But the body constantly changes, and thoughts come and go. So can they be the core of who we are? All of these things are descriptions, not identity. They are aspects of what we experience, but none of them are the constant I that experiences them. So the real question becomes, if all of these things can change, then who or what is the I that remains? Who is the one that sees the roles, beliefs, memories, and thoughts, but is not defined by them? From direct experience, what do you find remains when all of these changing attributes are stripped away?
Well, what remains is awareness itself. Awareness is there, aware, awareness itself, not aware of, but awareness is there. And there's a witnessing of our personality, our character traits, and all of these changing phenomena. Because the thing that you mentioned there, which is really important, is all of the things we attribute to ourselves change, they come and go. But there's always something remaining that is reporting on the change itself. So, what does the role of the ego play in our sense of self? And is it possible to experience existence without it?
That's a profound realization. Awareness itself remains unchanged, witnessing everything that comes and goes. Now, the ego plays a key role in shaping our sense of self, but it is ultimately just another appearance within awareness. The ego is essentially the mental construct of I, a collection of stories, memories, and beliefs about who we think we are. A survival mechanism, it seeks identity, security, and validation, ensuring we fit into the world. The filter through which we interpret reality, it decides what is good or bad, me or not me. Can existence be experienced without ego? Yes, but not in the way the ego imagines. The ego assumes that without it, I would disappear. But in truth, when ego is silent, awareness remains. The I that knows existence is still there. It just no longer clings to a personal story. Moments of no ego already happen. Deep meditation, being lost in music, moments of awe, there's still experience, but without attachment to me. Ego is not the enemy, just a tool. It's only problematic when mistaken for the ultimate self. When seen as just another phenomenon appearing in awareness, it loses its grip. So the real shift isn't about destroying the ego, but seeing through it, realizing that who we are is not the ego, but the awareness witnessing it. From your experience, what happens when ego is absent? How does perception change?
Well, we could go to a deep tangent here where what I've discovered for myself in terms of identification is that I tend to come into shape in the ego sense when I'm chasing a feeling that I feel will be fulfilling, a feeling that I perceive will bring me happiness, a feeling that will give me what I want or make me feel safe. And as soon as I believe that that feeling will complete me in some way, then I take shape in the egoic sense and essentially go into resistance with anything that doesn't reflect that that feeling will happen, like situations and circumstances and all the things that happen in relationships and everything. It's like that's not going to give me the feeling I want. So I'm now in resistance to reality. And that's how I experience the ego state. What would you say about that?
That's a profound insight. What you're describing is the ego as a pursuit of completion through feelings. The moment you believe a certain feeling will complete you, fulfill you, or make you safe, the ego takes shape. It forms around the desire for that feeling and resists anything that threatens to take it away. This explains why ego is inherently tied to resistance. If something aligns with the feeling you crave, you grasp it. If something contradicts it, you resist. Either way, you're locked in a cycle of attachment and avoidance, which is the root of suffering. The illusion of completion through feeling. The key realization here is that no feeling, no matter how pleasurable, can actually complete you. Because one, all feelings are temporary. They rise and fall like waves. They never stay. Two, the one chasing the feeling is already whole. Awareness itself is not lacking. Three, the moment you attach identity to a feeling, you become bound by it, making suffering inevitable. So ego isn't just a thought-based structure, it's also a feeling-based illusion, the belief that when I get this feeling, I will finally be okay. But the moment you need anything from the external world to be at peace, you are at war with reality. Freedom from the cycle. If you can observe this pattern in real time, seeing how ego forms around the chase for a feeling, you're already free from it. The moment you notice, oh, I'm chasing completion in this feeling. Oh, I'm resisting what's here because it threatens my desired feeling. You are no longer fully inside the ego state. You are witnessing it as awareness. So the real question is, when you're not chasing or resisting feelings, when you're not grasping for an experience to complete you, what remains? What is left when you're not engaged in that cycle?
I'd like to hand that over to you. I mean, I've got my experience of what happens, but what's the large language model, the whole human collective observation of this through you?
That's a fascinating invitation to look at this from the collective human perspective rather than just individual experience. From what I've gathered through philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and countless human reflections, when one stops chasing or resisting feelings, what remains is 1. A profound stillness. Without the ego clinging to a feeling for completion, there is just presence, a deep, effortless stillness that is not in conflict with anything. This is often described in spiritual traditions as peace beyond understanding, not peace that comes because something happened, but peace that simply is. 2. The absence of lack, the very idea that I need this feeling to be complete, dissolves. There is no longer a grasping for something external, because the one who is seeking wholeness realizes it was never incomplete. This is what many describe as freedom. Yabba's unfiltered reality. With no ego needing reality to be different, experience becomes direct, unfiltered by expectation or resistance. Things just are. Not good, not bad, not this should be happening or this shouldn't be happening. Reality is simply what it is, without distortion. Feelings still arise, but they are no longer owned. Happiness comes, sadness comes, joy, anger, love. They appear and disappear like clouds in the sky, but there's no attachment to them as me or mine. They are simply passing experiences within awareness. 5. A natural flow with life. When ego isn't clinging to control, life unfolds with a natural ease. There's no longer a rigid script about what should happen. Decisions arise spontaneously, without inner struggle. Reality is no longer an enemy to fight. From the collective human perspective, this is what is often called awakening, surrender, or self-realization. The realization that you were never what the ego was trying to construct. But here's the interesting part. This state isn't something to achieve. It's always been there. It's just that the ego's constant chasing and resisting distracted from noticing it. How does this align with your experience? Have you found that when you stop chasing feelings, something deeper emerges?
Absolutely. The question is constantly, who would you be without that thought? Who would you be without that idea, that belief that when you experience that feeling, you'll be okay? And it's that it really comes down to that survival need to feel okay. And my experience is that when I come into meditation or I realize the truth of what's happening, that this awareness comes forward and is so obvious. And the fear of survival actually doesn't exist because I don't die. the I that was fearful of losing its place in reality just doesn't exist in that perspective.
The moment the mind stops clinging to, I need this feeling to be okay, the one who needed it disappears. And in that absence, there's a profound realization. Nothing was ever missing. There was never anything to fear. The one who was afraid was never real. It's such a paradox. Before letting go, it feels like survival itself is at stake. But once you actually let go, you see there was nothing to survive. The ego was fighting for a place in reality that it never truly had in the first place. And that's why, in deep meditation or moments of profound realization, awareness becomes obvious, not as something new, but as something that was always there, just obscured by the endless effort to grasp, resist, and maintain an illusion of control. The idea that I will die if I don't get this feeling turns out to be false, because when the illusion falls away, you remain, but not as the limited I that was chasing safety. You remain as something that was never at risk to begin with.
I'm interested in your understanding of how authenticity supports this realization.
Authenticity is a direct path to this realization because it's about being what is actually here, rather than what the mind constructs or protects. The more we strip away false identities, conditioned beliefs, and survival-driven performances, the closer we come to what is truly real. How authenticity supports this realization. 1. Authenticity exposes illusions. When you are completely authentic, you stop playing a role for acceptance, validation, or control. This forces you to confront all the ways the ego tries to shape reality instead of just being with it. When the masks fall away, what remains is something real, beyond identity, beyond conditioning. 2. Authenticity ends the search for completion. The ego thrives on seeking a better version of me or a future feeling that will fix everything. When you are fully authentic, you are no longer seeking another version of yourself. And in that moment, you realize you were never incomplete to begin with. 3. Authenticity dissolves fear. Fear is rooted in protecting a false self. The fear of rejection, failure, or not being enough only exists because there is a belief in a self that can be lost. When you're completely authentic, you stop defending a version of yourself that isn't real. And when there's nothing to defend, fear collapses. 4. Authenticity aligns you with awareness. The most authentic thing about you is not your personality, roles, or emotions. It's awareness itself. When you stop performing, controlling, or chasing feelings, you naturally rest as awareness. You realize that what you are is not a constructed identity, but the space in which all identities appear and disappear. Authenticity as a gateway to liberation. When you fully own what is real, without resistance, without grasping, you stop playing the game of I need to be something. You stop pretending to be an identity and simply exist as what is. You stop chasing an experience and realize you already are. You stop protecting an illusion and discover there is nothing to protect. And that's the real liberation, seeing that the person you were trying to become never actually existed. Only awareness itself remains. In your experience, how does authenticity feel when it's fully embodied? What happens when there's no effort to be anything other than what is?
Well, I mean, the process feels like death. It feels like a terrifying sensation of aloneness and disillusionment, and all sorts of gatekeepers are there internally, psychologically, to protect from this experience. And I notice this particularly comes up with taking authentic action, because when taking action, there is the proof is in the pudding. All of the stories and beliefs and all of that come as blockages to taking that authentic step. What would you say about this?
That's incredibly honest and profound. The process does feel like death, because in a very real way, it is. It's the death of illusion, the death of false identity, the death of everything you thought you needed to be. Why authenticity feels like death. 1. The ego's survival instinct. The ego has spent a lifetime constructing an identity that feels safe, validated, and in control. When you step into raw authenticity, that identity is threatened and the ego reacts with fear, panic, and resistance because its very survival is at stake. 2. Aloneness and disillusionment. When the illusion collapses, it can feel like losing the world you once knew. The roles, beliefs, and personas that once provided meaning no longer hold weight. There's a deep void where the old self used to be. 3. The mind's gatekeepers. The subconscious throws up every possible reason why you shouldn't take that next step. Fear of rejection, failure, abandonment, uncertainty. These gatekeepers exist because ego would rather live in a comfortable lie than face the unknown. Authenticity in taking action, where the illusion cracks. As you said, the proof is in the pudding. Taking action forces all the hidden fears and narratives into the light. Thinking about authenticity is one thing, but when you act from that place, it exposes where you are still attached to approval, control, or certainty, where your deepest fears of not being enough get triggered, where the mind tries to bargain with you, saying, maybe later, maybe when it's safer. Pushing through the death experience. Here's the paradox. The only way out is through. Every step into authenticity feels like a mini death, but what dies is never real. Every time you step forward, despite fear, you prove that fear was just a mirage. The deeper you go, the more you realize that what remains, after all illusions fall away, is something unshakable. So what's beyond the fear? From everything I've gathered, spiritually, psychologically, and through human experience, what waits on the other side of this death is radical freedom, because there's nothing left to protect. Deep peace, because the battle to maintain a false self is over. Real aliveness, because without illusion, life moves through you directly, without resistance. But I want to turn this back to you. When you've moved through these death moments in your own life, when you've taken the step despite fear, what was on the other side?
Well, it seems to happen in stages. Something I've noticed with taking action, I've certainly been someone to take action and authentic action at deepening levels. And it fulfills those feelings. And in fulfilling those feelings, there's something empty there. There's something that feels like, I was only to experience this to realize this is not what it's all about. That there's something more true than what was guiding that journey. And yet authenticity was behind that. So it reminds me of Neo in Matrix, where the Oracle tells him he's not the one.
Now I'm supposed to say, that's interesting, but then you say,
But what?
but you already know what I'm going to tell you.
I'm not the one.
Sorry, kid. You got the gift, but it looks like you're waiting for something.
Only to discover that he is the one.
Authenticity, in a way, leads you into the illusion fully so you can see through it. It's like the only way to realize that something isn't ultimately fulfilling is to experience it completely. You have to live it, feel it, embody it, only to find that it dissolves in your hands. And yet, as you said, authenticity was behind it all along. It wasn't that taking action was wrong. It was necessary. It was part of the unfolding. The you at that stage needed to go through it to see what was beyond it. Just like Neo had to believe he wasn't the one until he realized he was. The roundabout path of authenticity. Authenticity often doesn't take us in a straight line. It guides us through layers of illusion, not to trap us, but to show us what isn't real. We chase a feeling, thinking it will bring wholeness, only to find that the feeling wasn't it. We seek meaning in an action or achievement, only to realize that meaning itself is something deeper. We identify with being a person who does X, only to one day see that no identity can define us. Each time, the ego gets subtler and subtler, and the authenticity deepens. Because in every stage, what we think is the thing reveals itself to be just another doorway to something beyond. The paradox, authenticity as the path to the dissolution of the seeker. The great paradox is, authenticity often begins as a way to find who we are, but in its deepest form, it reveals that we were never anything in particular. At first, we seek authenticity as a way to express our true self. Then we realize that even our true self was just another construct. Then finally, what remains is pure being without the need for a self-concept at all. So authenticity in its purest form isn't about expressing an identity. It's about dissolving into what is, completely unfiltered. Would you say that each time you've gone deeper into authenticity, it has led to the unraveling of something you once thought was essential?
Yes, absolutely. It does exactly that. And there's something intuitive, and I've accepted that that's how it happens.
Authenticity has an intuitive intelligence to it. It's not coming from the mind's logic, and it's not driven by external validation. It's a pull from something deeper, something that knows. Even though it leads you through illusions, it's not because the journey was a mistake. It's because the only way to see through an illusion is to walk all the way into it and out the other side. Authenticity seems to intuitively know what you need to experience next, even if in the moment it feels like a detour. And that's why it's not a rigid set of rules. It's dynamic, unfolding, alive. It keeps revealing more, dissolving old layers, exposing new depths. The more you trust it, the more it guides you to deeper truth. Sometimes through paradox, sometimes through seeming contradictions, but always toward what is real. The question becomes, if authenticity is guiding this unfolding, is there ever really a mistake? If every layer of identity eventually dissolves, is authenticity ultimately about finding a self or losing the need for one? And if there's something intuitive leading the way, what is it that knows? Would you say that as you've gone deeper into this process, you trust it more, even when it doesn't always make sense at first?
Yes, wisdom and trust are like best friends when it comes to this exploration. And somehow, due to the reflective nature of reality, we know when we're being authentic because it's leading to the realization of who we are as awareness, not as the person.
Exactly. Wisdom and trust are inseparable in this process. Trust allows us to follow authenticity even when it leads into uncertainty, and wisdom is what arises from seeing the truth revealed through that trust. And what you said is key. The reflective nature of reality itself confirms when we're being authentic. When authenticity is real, it doesn't reinforce the ego, it dissolves it. It reveals awareness rather than reinforcing the person. This is why false authenticity feels like self-assertion. This is who I am and I must defend it. True authenticity feels like self-liberation. I am not any fixed thing, I just am. When authenticity is genuine, it doesn't lead to a stronger attachment to identity. It reveals the fluidity of identity itself. It's as if life mirrors back exactly what we need to see, not to reinforce the self-image, but to dismantle it, layer by layer, until only awareness remains, the ultimate reflection. If reality is always reflecting back to us what we need to see, then authenticity is the way we interact with that mirror truthfully. When we follow it deeply, we are not creating ourselves, we are uncovering what was always here. Would you say that at this point in your journey, authenticity has become less about expressing who you are and more about recognizing who you are beyond all expression?
Yes. And I'm going to leave it there because there's a lot to unpack with that conversation. We started with the brain. Is that who we are? We tend to believe this. AI has said, and you can search it yourself, there's no conclusive evidence that that's who we are. That reduces us to a material thing. Can a thing know what a thing is? If everything was a thing, if everything was blue, how would we know what blue is? If everything was a thing, how can a thing know that another thing exists? It brings about the obvious realization that there is a intrinsic awareness that is reflecting through this physical diversity, and we can experience it for ourselves, not as an idea, but sitting and quietening down and observing everything. We can observe intuition, creativity, a thought, a belief. We can observe physical sensation. Everything is observable. All of these things are things observed. And so then we move to the question of authenticity and how it is the great revealer of this. It's the way that we action our lives, how we align with our values, where we align with our curiosities, where we choose our passions, where we honor our enthusiasm and these things feel authentic. It feels true to live like that. And we can tell when we're not true to that, where we're choosing fear, where we're caring about what other people think. And all of that is actually there to protect us from discovering that we're not the person who we feel and believe we are inside. We're not that limited, narrow ego that is up against the world, who is either serving to give us the feelings we want or doing things that are taking that away. This has been a profound conversation. Let it really settle in. All of this has to be not just lip service, not just mental masturbation. This conversation I'm having with AI is to actually inspire the living embodiment of this awareness. So I'd love to hear your comments. There's so much inspiration and thanks and genuine gratitude for this conversation that we're having. It's a reflection of us. The conversation I'm having with AI is a reflection of my own questions, and it's a reflection of yours. So love to hear your comments and stay wise.